Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. Man, we got a very cool guest with shit tons of experience, and he's got my favorite accent, British. You're probably so sick of hearing that your whole life, right?
Yeah, well,
From,
there's not much of it left, I think. But
oh no, man, I hear it. Say it loud, say it proud. We're with Bill Wittman. Let me just give a quick shout out to Eric Bazillion for connecting us, and don't forget to go to everyonelovesguitar.com/subscribe, and you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and the audio of the podcast as well. Let me tell you about Bill, Grammy Award-winning producer, engineer, musician, and songwriter, whose credits include multi-platinum debut albums from Cyndi Lauper, Joan Osbourne, the Hooters, which is Eric Bazillion, of course, and the Outfield. Additionally, Bill's worked with a wide range of artists, including Mick Jagger, Bob Dylan, Roger Waters, the Chieftains, Graham Parker, and the Fixx. Man, I had Jamie West Oram on.
one of my favorite people.
What a player. But it was really weird. He goes, hey, man, where are you located? Because we're doing one concert in the States in Clearwater, Florida in 3 weeks. And I was like, that's, like 20 minutes away from me.
Yeah.
How random was that? Bill was the chief engineer at several major recording studios until his success as an independent producer led to several years as an A&R VP and staff producer at Sony, Columbia, and BMG RCA. As a musician, he was a member of the seminal alternative rock band Too Much Joy. And for the last 20 years, he's been the bass guitar player and music director for Cyndi Lauper's band, recording and touring internationally. He's appeared on nationally televised shows, including The Late Show with David Letterman, The Rosie O'Donnell Show, CBS Late Show, Ellen DeGeneres, NBC Christmas Tree Lighting Special, which is so cool, and New Year's Eve in Times Square, which is also cool. Bill, thanks so much for your time, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, man. I don't even know where to start with this. There's like more celebrities in here than I had to mention in one. It's good when you have just some people have like this many people, but you only have this many, but that's all you need. It's like it's like all the top. Let's start with.
It starts to sound a bit desperate if you start listing 50 people, right?
No, you know what it is? It's always, when people really haven't done much, like I remember I had to beg you, please let me have let me have some background on you, because you're you're not a guy that wants to bag in his chest. But people that really haven't done much, they'll give me like a 3-page bio.
That's what I mean. And it reads a little desperate to me.
Yeah, it is. It's always like, in kindergarten, I played in the. Anyway, tell me how you first got started in the music business.
Basically, I was, 11 years old, and the Beatles happened, and I looked at the television and said, I want to do that. And like almost everybody else, the next day, it seemed like, it can't be true, but it seemed like the next day at school, everybody had a guitar. And pretty soon I was in a band, and kind of logical progression went from the band just playing other people's songs, in my case, mostly Beatles songs, and to the band trying to write songs and trying to do some recording. And the first time I walked into a recording studio, I just went, oh, look at that. And I was always the guy in the band who was interested in what was going on the other side of the window. And so I just sort of continued with bands and trying to make it, and had development deals and trying to make things happen. But I always had a foot in the control room trying to worm my way into learning about, how do you do that? And maybe you could show me how you're doing this. And a little bit by accident, it was a simpler time, I should say. And so it wasn't like you had 1,000 people trying to get into the door in the recording studios. It wasn't the thing everybody wanted to do. And so I kind of wormed my way into being able to, I want to call it intern, but really was a kind of an unofficial hang out at the studio, learn how to do things, poke my way around in various places until I was at a point where I could record my own band okay. And then other friends said, oh, I like the demo you did for your band. Could you come and help us make a demo or make a record? And then that, again, by a kind of, I was sort of freelance engineering without having ever really had a job as an engineer.
This was in England, all
It
this?
was it was both. The thing is, I came my parents moved when I was quite young
Okay.
to New York, and then at a certain point, my first entrance into a recording studio would have been in New York, but then I did move at a certain point back to work. I just had a sort of I don't know, a fantasy idea of I was much more enamored of records being made in England and the way they were being made. And I sort of had the ability to go say, oh, I'm going to see what that's like for a bit and do that.
That's really, so you came here as a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
What made your folks move?
It was a weird thing. I don't know exactly. My grandfather decided to move his business. And so his two sons moved with him. And that's sort of and they ran the business, and that's what happened.
In New York?
Yeah.
What kind of, if it's okay, talk to me.
Yeah. It's not interesting, but it's okay. They made bedspreads and curtains, draperies.
Isn't it wild how many, because I'm from there and I grew up, and I'm 56, so I grew up 60s, 70s. Isn't it wild how many businesses like that were in Manhattan at various locations at one time? I mean, it's mind-boggling, and there's none.
Well, I guess so. I mean, the garment district is still called the garment district. I don't know how much is actually being made there anymore, but it certainly was.
Yeah, that's wild. That's actually pretty cool. So your granddad moved over, and then your dad and his brother moved over with him. And then,
exactly.
Very cool. When you first came over, this is where you kind of got into the studio, and where did you learn like how to mix and engineer things?
Well, I learned by a combination of watching people do things, often to is a funny word, often to my band or things I was involved with as a player, and then trying to do it myself. So it's a little bit of trial and error mixed with observation. There's very little of somebody saying, hey, this is how you do it. It was just me seeing how they did it and saying, oh, that guy used this microphone on the guitar amp. This other guy used this other microphone. I like that one better. I'm going to try that. And then being able to have access to studios where I could try things myself, it really was more by trial and error, which is not a method I necessarily recommend, but it worked for me. And I know other people who, at least I haven't heard it firsthand, but the story I heard about Mutt Lange was that he was making cover records for the South African market, and he just would go in and try to clone sounds. He'd put up a Beatles record or whatever it is, and painstakingly try to get every sound to match, and that's how he learned how to put together a record. And I did pretty much the same thing, that we would put on a record and go, today we're going to copy that, and then tomorrow we're going to record one of our own songs, but today we're going to dissect some track and figure out how it goes together. And if you have access to the equipment and the time, it's not a bad way to learn. It's not the most efficient way, but it works over time because you internalize it for yourself rather than just being told how you're supposed to do something.
Well, you get to put your own imprint onto something from day one, which is also really cool. And you're not like, well, you're supposed to do this. You know, you had to go by your gut and your ear. Yeah,
I had to be convinced for myself that it was going to be a better way to do something, rather than a lot of people grew up in the studio where somebody would say, oh no, you must put that mic on the acoustic guitar. How come you didn't put that mic on the acoustic guitar? I never had anybody standing over my shoulder, which again, in some senses, that means I also don't have the benefit of somebody's experience, but I also managed to avoid those kind of dogmatic, we got to do it this way issues.
But at one point, and I don't know if we're going out of sequence, you were working in studios in big corporations. How did that suddenly, because, you know, from a temperament standpoint, that's a different ball game where you're like, hey man, I don't have this bullshit. I'm doing my thing, well, you know, respectfully serving your client, and now you're in a corporation. How did that?
Well, but again, to go, you know, we're zooming through the timeline, which is better, but I went from sort of recording myself, recording friends, hey, can you come and do some overdubs, to, oh, the guy who did the guitars on that, you should get him to record us next week. And all of a sudden I was doing overdubs on some pretty big artists, big records. And then eventually I was able to get a job in a recording studio or several recording studios. But at that point, I was a balance engineer. I was not an assistant. You know, I was already recording things. I was getting hired to record things. So people
Okay.
would, I'm booking the place because I want that guy, or who do you have that's good? And they give you that guy, which could be me. And that was, there wasn't
Okay.
anybody at that point sitting on my shoulder. As long as the client walked out happy, there was nobody telling me what to do. In fact, they were hoping you knew what to do, that they didn't have to tell you anything.
Okay. So you had full autonomy pretty much the whole way through because of the early dues
Yeah.
you paid.
Yeah.
Who's overdubs, man? Since you got me curious now, what you played on some?
I did. Well, I recorded. I did Cat Stevens. I did Jethro Tull. I did Procol Harum, Mott the Hoople. I mean, there are a lot of earlier on, and weird things. I mean, early in my career, I recorded not so much overdubs, but it's funny because I can't find any. The documentation is so sketchy on those records, but I recorded a bunch of Sun Ra, for
Did you?
example. Yeah, and Toots and the Maytals. I mean, you know, a lot of weird stuff that doesn't well, weird, great stuff, but I mean, that doesn't fit in with the rest of my sort of musical vocabulary. But as a studio engineer, you just stuff crosses the threshold, and you have to sort of be prepared for anything.
What was it like working with, say, Tull or Mott? You know, I had Martin Barr on here, and he was like, it was like talking. He's probably in his late 70s. It was like talking to 17-year-old Martin Barr, though, because he was so. All he wanted. I mean, I got to go play my guitar now. Sorry, I got to leave. It was like kind of cool.
Well, that's a great thing, right?
Yeah, that enthusiasm. It was really cool. What were they like back in the day?
It was just pretty workmanlike, I have to say. I mean, it was just, we have an agenda. We have to get the guitars done on this particular song. They knew what they wanted to do. It was mostly him, you know, all day.
Right.
And it was not, there's no great story there. It was very, very workmanlike. It was certainly not a crazy rock and roll scene with them at all.
Yeah. Do you know a guy named in California, originally from England too, Tony Phillips?
No.
He's an engineer. His story is like very similar to, not very similar, but he started in a band and then he was the guy, you know, he's in a smaller town though, not New York City, but just very interesting hearing this.
Well, almost all of us, I think, started in a band, don't you think? I mean, if you talk to almost any engineer or producer, there are very few exceptions that they didn't start either being a singer or playing in a band.
Yeah, even if they went to school for engineering, they were playing guitar at home in a band or something like that. Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah,
Totally.
there has to be a reason you're drawn to making music or recording music, even if they realize pretty early on they're not going to be rock stars, which it took me probably too long to recognize, but
that's all right. I think everybody comes to a point where they just say, "Hey, I realize I'm not going to be a rock star." And
right. Although now I get to play one all the time, so it's kind of good.
There you go. Okay, Too Much Joy.
Yeah.
You guys were an alt pop rock band before they had all these terms. And a lot of the acts you've produced, like, really haven't strayed far from that, you know? Is that what you were attracted to as a kid and have still remained attracted to as a genre?
I think I am primarily attracted to, because of, you know, I'll backtrack a tiny bit. I guess my biggest influences, the Beatles are kind of everything to me. I mean, that's what made me want to do it. It's what, you know, everything I do is in some respect influenced by them. Followed closely on by The Who, that had that same level or close to that same level of songwriting, but also the musicianship and the power and energy of the live performance that goes into The Who, that in some respects transcends the Beatles live.
Yeah,
the Beatles had enormous charisma live. You know, there's the whole enormous stage show aspect and power of The Who. Those two things sort of influence almost everything I do one way or another. And so I tend to be attracted to bands with guitars, bands with good pop songs, bands with harmonies, You know, those are the things that resonate the most closely for me. And so those are the projects that I feel I also have the most to offer, which is not to say that's everything I do. I mean, Cyndi steps away from that model in a lot of ways, but also has a lot of those elements that,
Yeah.
yeah, that cross or that intersect.
And it's interesting if you go through just this list that I read, you know, the Hooters, the Outfield, Dylan, Roger Waters, the Fixx, talk about good melodies.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys, those great songs, first and foremost, you know.
Well,
So
some of those guys are a little more, I mean, I would say Roger and certainly Dylan are more lyric oriented than they are melody oriented, but there's still a big area of intersection there with that same kind of thing. You know, I'm maybe I'm a heretic for saying this, but you know, I'm internally more attracted to the Byrds doing Mr. Tambourine Man than I am to Dylan doing Mr. Tambourine Man. It's like,
yeah, well, yeah, I get what you're saying. Well, Dylan's he's such a question mark with everything, like, you know, that he does. But it's interesting, you know, the last Roger Waters album, the one that came out like 2-3 years ago, that was like, maybe in my opinion, maybe his most melodic record solo. It was lyrically intense, but
yeah.
Now that you mentioned it, that was pretty melodic. I mean, that was sort of structured for him.
Yes, I mean, I wonder. I don't know. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I mean, I wonder if he's just become more comfortable singing, and so he's okay giving himself those melodies he used to give to Gilmour, or used to think I can't do on my own without Gilmour singing. Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't. Or he's older and he said, you know, like a lot of guys like me and probably like you in some aspects. Fuck it, I don't care, man.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do.
said what the fuck, yeah.
Yeah, you just give less shits at a certain age, and you're like, you know, I want to do this. So,
Yeah. Well,
Roger, if you're listening, you need to come on here and explain this. What's that?
If he's not careful, he won't make it. So.
Oh man. Okay, so talk about, you know, when you were an A&R VP, like what are the day-to-day duties of that job, and what were the coolest things and the most frustrating things that you encountered in that?
Well, I'll tell you, the story with that sort of sums up the answer to that. I think that the story was I had made a bunch of records, and some of them pretty successful, including even the Outfield and the Hooters and Cyndi's record. And I had a bunch of hit records for, mostly for CBS, well, now Sony, but CBS. And my feeling a lot of times was you give birth to the baby, and then somebody comes in, grabs the baby, runs in the other room and says, okay, we're going to name it. We're going to dress it. I'll give up. They're going to pick the single. They're going to decide how to market it. They're going to tell you, no, this edit isn't right. It's like it gets taken away from you. And as a producer, you're pretty invested. You're the best if you're lucky. And it felt like being on the inside would give me some of a hand on that process that I felt I wanted, that I was missing or frustrated by. And so it presented that my then manager got offered the job to be the president of RCA Records. And he said to me, you know, I wouldn't offer this to very many of the guys that I produce, but I sort of see how you're interested in the business and you interact and you read the tip sheets and you know people, and I think you could do this. Would you like an A&R Weasel job? My word, not his. Yeah. Anyway, I actually said no for about another year and a half, I think, and finally said, you know what, because of these frustrations that I was talking about, yes, I think if I was on the inside, I might have more input into the process. But then what happens in reality is now you're friends with the promotion department and the marketing department. And now when these guys say, no, I'm the promo guy, I know what goes on the radio. Now you're arguing with your friend. It's almost in a certain sense more difficult. I mean, I'm not, I like to think, a particularly political or manipulative person. I think you need a personality that massages your way through that system to get things done effectively.
Absolutely.
And I don't really have that. that personality.
Yeah.
And in a sense, it was, I don't want to say more frustrating, but it was no less frustrating being inside than it was being outside. You know, on the other hand, it was interesting and enlightening to sort of see how record companies work or don't work. Somebody had said this to me a while ago, but it turned out to be proven to be true. Somebody once said to me, if record companies and had the power that the average person in the business or a guy in a band thinks they have, then every record that Columbia Records puts out would be a hit. They'd say, no, we have the money, we have the connections, we have the cocaine and the hookers, we have whatever it takes to make the record a hit, we'll make every record a hit. That does not happen. That the record company has much less power than people like to think. That they are essentially just an effective middleman, but the record has to have the legs and the radio stations have to want to play it, or in these days, whatever that mechanism is.
Yeah.
That you know, now they're very much reliant on you to go out and work your social media and managers to make it happen and other people. But that big system is just this kind of self-perpetuating amorphous system that is not anywhere near as controlled by the record companies as usually people who are frustrated by it like to think it is. They like to say, oh, if only Columbia had put the money behind us, we would have been the Beatles. And that just does not work that way.
Because ultimately a good song most of the time is going to rise to the top and bad songs are not.
Yeah, and especially the latter. I mean, things will get missed. There's no question.
Sure.
On the other hand, it's very unusual that something crappy turns out to be a hit. You might not like it, but there's a reason why a million people like it.
Yeah, I totally get that, man. Okay, so let me ask this. Let's take something like Pink Floyd or Roger Waters.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Floyd and Waters, and I'm listening, you know, they're my desert island band pretty much, right? Yet they've been very popular, but their stuff, especially Roger Waters, his solo stuff, it's not what you would think is, you know, what, a guy who's not out there in the streets would support. How does that, work? Like, how do they let that through and it worked?
Well,
I don't even know if I'm asking the right question or if I'm articulating.
If I'm understanding it correctly, I mean, you know, there's a band that worked hard, played live, had, you know, kind of art school success, wasn't, you know, a little bit of a critical darling, but not massive success, sort of built it up and then made this one album that's crazy accessible, that's really poppy in a sense for them.
Yeah.
I mean, Dark Side of the Moon's got hit songs on it. I mean, you know, everybody walks into the music store, picks up the bass guitar and plays Money. You know,
yes, man.
It's accessible. You know, Us and Them sounds like a hit record. And, you know, in no small part due to the fact that it's a beautifully made record too. But
it's amazing.
But the songs on that are pop record kind of radio friendly, accessible, and that huge breakthrough. I mean, you know, what is it? The longest running album on the Billboard charts ever, I think. Right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that opens a door that pretty much stays open, you know? So, and then again, you follow that with The Wall, which was also massive.
Yeah.
No pun intended. The thing is, it now becomes very difficult to say Roger Waters doesn't have an audience or an entree to the radio or the ability to be noticed for what he does.
Right.
You know, out and toward the wall, right? I mean, you're going to get millions of people to see that, and those people are going to wonder about your new record, and it almost doesn't matter what it is. Plus, what it is pretty high quality. So
it's great, yeah.
So I'm saying, but on the other hand, if you're a 17-year-old writing Amused to Death and you don't have that history, it's going to be very difficult for you to get that past whatever. They're not really gatekeepers so much anymore, but just out of the enormous haystack of what's on Spotify or Pandora or whatever it is, how are people going to notice you doing that? You know, unless you
Oh, okay.
you got the hit, the viral hit that says, "Oh, who's that guy?" I think that's the difference. You know, Roger has that enormous calling card from the success of Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall.
Okay, so that really is like a door. You know, I always have this expression, yeah, somebody can get your foot in the door, but it's up to you to keep that door open. When you release a record like Dark Side, that your door's open for almost forever.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about, one of the biggest records ever. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, everybody wants to know what McCartney's new record's going to be, whether you like it or not. It's like, that's very different than nobody's waiting to see what the next, I don't know whose record is. You know, It's like, you have to convince me to listen to your record. Paul's already got people going, what's he going to do next?
Yeah. Even guys that like Paul Simon, who like his stuff in the last 10, 15 years isn't like it used to be, but it sells. It's, you know, the guy sells out the Garden 4 or 5 nights in a row.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You know what I did, man?
You said, so you heard Roger writing The Lunatic Was on the Grass was?
Yeah, he wrote it at Cambridge, out behind King's College Chapel. And he wrote it. There was a sign there. It said, "Don't walk on the grass." You know, it's the normal signs that you see. And he said he thought it was so ridiculous that you had this beautiful grass, you couldn't walk on it. So when my wife brought us all over to visit her family, we went up to Cambridge, and I took my older son, who's really into Pink Floyd. And this is probably 15 years ago. So he was like, I don't know, 15. He's almost 30 now. And we sat there, and this is before iPhones and iPods. So we had like a CD player with a split headphones. And we just listened to the song, man. And it was such a memorable thing because we sat on the bench where he wrote the lyrics to that song.
Sure.
You know, it's just an iconic record like that, you know. It's like All You Zombies with the Hooters. You listen to that, man. It's just, you get goosebumps every time you hear that. You know, it's just certain records that are just incredible.
That's a nice comparison. Thank you. I'm sure they would thank you for that comparison.
It's a great song, man. It's
you know, and that went through some major incarnations. There were at least 3 or 4 different. I mean, I think I recorded an earlier version. I'm pretty sure I did a single version of that, and then Rick Chertoff had come in and said, "Now we want to sort of tear that apart and completely redo the arrangement for Nervous Night." And so that went through a bunch of changes to get to where it was.
It's a killer. I mean, it's really a moving. It's impossible to listen to that and not just feel that.
Oh, that's nice. I was afraid you were just going to say it's impossible to listen to that.
Man, you still got your English humor. All right. Let's talk about, I'm going to name some artists. Tell me how you connected with them initially, and if you have a funny or cool or interesting story. Let's start with Cyndi, since you're out with her now. What a long relationship. That's like pretty unusual in the music business.
Yes, I think I said it when at the Grammy acceptance speech. I said the first 35 years are the hardest.
That's awesome, man. So how'd you get connected with her, and tell me something funny or interesting about your experience with her?
Oh, that's a big topic, but that was very much through Rick Chertoff, who at the time was a Columbia staff producer, and Cyndi was just signing to Epic, which was the sister label at CBS. And Rick and I Rick's a big collector of songs, like especially what they call compulsory license songs, which is to say songs that somebody has released, maybe on a little label or maybe just on a record where it didn't get any attention, and looked at it and went, you know what, that song by the right person done the right way, maybe they didn't make the right record, maybe they got unlucky, but that song could be a hit song for somebody.
What is that called? Compulsory?
Well, compulsory license means that if a song has been released in your territory, in this case the United States, or it might be North America, but I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on television. But it means if the song has been released commercially in your territory, you don't need permission to re-record it. As long as you pay the royalties, if you want to go out and record Yesterday, you don't have to ask Paul's permission. You can just record it. You'll owe him the money for the sales, but you don't need permission. Whereas if you have a song that has not been released, the songwriter can control, or his publisher can control who can do the first recording of it.
Oh, that's interesting.
So we were collecting, I think there's some contention as to who found Money Changes Everything. I think we both think we found it. But Rick certainly had found Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and we were demoing that. We were demoing When You Were Mine, the Prince song. We were demoing All Through the Night. We had a bunch of songs that Rick was convinced these are going to be a hit for somebody. And we were again, mostly because of girls in particular, we were mostly looking at women, but just demoing and trying to figure out what to do with these. And then by serendipity, Rick took a flight on the CBS jet with the guy who was the head of A&R at Epic, who had just signed Cyndi. And it was basically like, well, what are you doing? Well, I have these songs and I'm looking around. What are you doing? Well, I have this really cool young singer who's just getting out of her rockabilly band, and I'm signing it and I'm looking for what to do. And it was like, I've got peanut butter and you've got chocolate. Let's maybe have a meeting. And that lucky meeting is the whole Cyndi story. And pretty soon after that, we had a meeting. I came up to Rick's office. I met Cyndi. We sat at the piano there a little bit, and then it all started to happen. And then Rick involved Rob and Eric from the Hooters, which was not uncommon on things we had done together, all of us. And it goes from there. So that's the Cyndi connection.
Holy crap. Okay, so you're her MD now. How did that all come about?
Well, we worked together on and off, mostly off. I mean, after the first record, we didn't work together for a long time. And then around Hatful of Stars record, she called me up and said, I'm having trouble getting somebody to record vocals the way I'm happy with. Would you like to come in and do that? And I ended up finishing that record completely with her and sort of stayed in the loop. And then around 2000 or 1999, we started working on a record, and I was producing the record with her. And at the same time, playing shows. It was not as busy as it had been, but I was still playing with too much joy at that point. And she said, you know, I have this show coming up at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yoko asked me to play at the opening of the John Lennon exhibit in the hall in Cleveland. And would you like, it actually said, you're playing with them. Why can't you play with me?
Man, you do her voice perfect, literally. Oh man,
that's what happened. So I played that sort of one-off show, put together a little band of people we were using making this record, and played this one-off show, and pretty much have been playing in her band ever since.
Bass guitar? What are you playing with her?
Yeah, bass guitar.
You're playing bass. Wow, that is so funny how you said that, man. I almost, it sounded like Cyndi exactly, man. That was pretty cool. You've been all over the world with her.
Yes. Twice.
Tell me some interesting, funny things. I'm not looking for gossip stuff, just, you know, cool or interesting things.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, interesting. I don't know. I almost don't know what's interesting anymore. You know, I mean, we've played some amazing places. I mean, I always, you know, places that everybody wants to play, like, you know, the Hollywood Bowl, the Hammersmith Odeon, you know, Carnegie Hall, you know, the places that you, especially places the Beatles played, always appealed to me.
Yeah.
You know, Red Rocks, you know, we played sort of everywhere, but we also played in front of one of the first Western acts to play in front of one of the major gates of the Great Wall of China.
Mm.
You know, we played the Budokan. You know, it's like, I almost don't know where to start with that because there's so much of it. I mean, we've played pretty much every great place you could want to play.
When you go back, when you're playing in Hammersmith or any nice place in England,
mm-hmm.
do you ever like stand up stage and like just think of the journey and how, like, I'm sure none of that is anything you'd expected.
Sure. Well, it's what you hope. So,
right.
I mean, any of those places, as I said, you know, any place, you know, the stage of the Ed Sullivan Theater, you know, it's like, I feel like when I was 10 or 11 and said, oh, this is what I want to do. Well, this is where I wanted to be. I wanted to be on this stage that the Beatles played. And it's like, wow, how great is it that I get to do that? So yeah, it's a little bit of a pinch me moment.
Yeah.
But, it usually can't last long because then you've got a sound check.
Talk about the Hooters, man. How did you get involved with those guys and some cool stories? Those guys are great songwriters, man.
Yeah. And amazing players.
Yeah. Eric's such an underrated guitarist, man. He's real. I mean, you know, I think maybe because he writes such great songs and he's not a guitar solo song band, but man, that guy can play.
Yeah. And soloing is not his best thing. I don't know if he'd be happy with me saying that, but I mean, not that he's not a great soloist, but his best thing is when you're just shaping a record, shaping a song, that he'll pick up a guitar and go, oh, what about this? And just that part that isn't the part that you necessarily jump out and go, oh, that's the whole record. But that riff, that style, that way he plays a part is what makes it sound like a record. I mean, that is his great strength, I think.
Like the kind of the reggae stuff.
All that stuff. But I mean,
on the back of All You Zombies.
Or even the riff in One of Us is more important than almost anything else in that song.
Yeah.
But the Hooters are also through Rick Chertoff that was actually right about when we met. I was the chief engineer at a New York studio called Sound Mixers. And Arista, Clive Davis had made a deal where he gave the studio like a big lump of money and said, here's $50,000 or whatever it was. And in exchange for that, instead of paying $150 an hour in 1977 money, I want to give you $100 an hour or whatever the numbers were. It was like, I want a discount on the hourly rate in exchange for basically a big advance that you already have the money in your pocket. So I want a better hourly rate for my artists, which was great for the studio. And everybody was happy all the way around.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Why did it sounds like he just prepaid for advanced studio time. What am I missing?
Well, yes, but for a lower rate. So in other words, the interest on his loan was that.
Oh, it was a loan. I didn't realize that. Okay, so he gave.
Well, it's an advance. So you don't have to pay it back.
Gotcha.
But the point is, he wanted a lower rate.
Got it.
Basically, all his album budgets would pay less because he gave you the money up front.
Total, and you had to pay. That came. I get it. And I get it now. Yeah.
Yeah, and so because of that, Rick at that time was an Arista young starting out Arista staff producer. And so Clive was muscling him going, I made this deal at the studio, you should go work there. And so Rick came by and sort of, I guess, said to them, well, who's like the most album-oriented, rock-oriented engineer you got? And I don't know if I was the only one on the list, but I was the one who ended up trying it out with Rick. And I know I played him a bunch of stuff I had done, not necessarily right up his street, but I think we saw we were coming from a similar place. And I know we said, I'll give you we'll arrange for a free day or two, might have been 2 days over a weekend. Bring in this young band you've got called Baby Grand.
Yeah.
And we'll do a day and we'll see how we get on, how we like it. And that's what we did. They came in on a weekend and we banged out one song. Might have been over 2 days, but and then I guess everybody was happy enough that he came back and we did 2 albums right away. One was for an R&B band called Breakwater that he had on the label, and the other was Baby Grand, which was Rob and Eric's earlier prog rock band.
What a smart move business-wise. Where did you get that from? That's just like, it's a free sample. Like you go to Costco or whatever, you know, and in the aisle. But that's smart. Most people wouldn't be smart enough to do that.
Well, if somebody's on the fence, I mean, I will still do that. I will still say, if you're not sure, I'll do a mix for you. And if you use it, you'll pay me. And if you don't use it, that's okay. You know, it's like sometimes if you have no other way to shake somebody off the fence, that's fine. It's like, so it's a day out of my life. So what?
Yeah. And most of the time you're going to close on those.
I would like to think I'm egotistical enough to think, yes, you're going to like it. And if you don't, as I said, it's a day out of my life. So what?
Yeah. Right.
The harder part was convincing the studio to give them the free day, but I think they also saw they had Clive's money in hand and they needed to spend it. So
That's cool, man. Really smart move, man. I hope people listening, I mean, musicians even, if you're not sure if somebody wants to hire you, man, tell them you'll work for free for a week or two. And, when I mentioned before, I write ad copy. My son, my older boy, again, I always use him as example. He was, he's a testing ground. Your first kid is like, I don't know, do you have kids?
One.
Yeah. Well, when you have multiples, like the first one you make all your mistakes with, and then the others you learn. But so when he went to get a job, he was 14. And he says, Dad, they're not going to hire me. I'm too young. I said, give him this letter. And I wrote this letter and it said, listen, test me out. I'm really hardworking. If you're unhappy with me, don't pay me. I have no problem with that. Mm-hmm. And if you are, hire me. Mm-hmm. And he got hired. But that's it's not like complicated. There's a no lose for everybody.
Yeah.
So
I'm generally against working for free, but it's different as a trial.
Yes.
That's somewhat different.
Absolutely. And you got to define your parameters up front along with that. Like, this is a free trial. It's not like for everything you're going to pay, and you're going to pay top dollar if you like this, or however your verbiage is. But yeah, as long as you put the parameters up front, people understand that. I don't think they're looking at, well, that's great, man. And look how many years you've had a relationship with those guys?
Yeah, it's like 40 years now, right?
I mean, that's best free trial on both sides that anybody ever got.
Yeah, well, that team turned out to be a pretty lucky combination.
Yeah, really lucky. Tell me some funny stories or interesting stories about the Hooters.
I'm not good with, it's funny. It's not funny.
You are funny, actually.
I don't tend to think in terms of anecdotes like that, funny stories about the Hooters. I don't know. The funny thing about them, I remember, was it was always difficult wrangling all of them. In fact, Rick used to make fun of that if one of them raised his hand and said, I need to take a break, I need to go to the lavatory, what would happen is he'd say, watch. The other one or another one of them will wait until he comes back to then say, oh, no, now I have to go. It will never occur to them to go, oh, let's both take a break now so that we don't. It was always a little bit of herding cats with them.
That's funny, man. Talk about the Fixx. And I wonder, let me tell you a story that Jamie told me. I wonder if you were involved in this. He told me about a story where him and Cy were hired to do a song for some licensing. It was a movie or a television show. And this was back, I guess, in the early or mid 80s, maybe. And they were both partying. They were fucking out of their minds. And they were both living in New York. And Cy calls him up. And Jamie thought Cy had done the record and Cy or written the song, and he calls him up and he goes, hey, this guy's coming over in a half hour. Do you have the music? And he's like, no, I thought you had the music. So he runs over to Cy's house. Literally, they got a half hour left, and somehow they cranked out this tune, and it worked. Were you involved in any of that?
No, that does not ring a bell. You don't know what the song was, do you?
No, I don't. But I was thinking maybe you're the guy who's coming knocking on the door.
No, my experience with them, they were pretty prepared already. I mean, they had the songs. I mean, in fact, I think we culled from maybe 14 down to 10 or 11 to put on the first record I made with them. So, I mean, the songs were definitely in place, and I thought they were really strong.
Oh, yeah. So, and those guys, there's a weird chemistry that they have. Like, I don't know that they would work well with other people.
Well, Jamie does and did. I mean, for a long time, Rupert Hine would use Jamie as the secret weapon on almost every record he made. It was like, I'll make a basic track and then I'll sprinkle Jamie West Oram on top and it'll be brilliant. Generally is.
Yeah.
We used Jamie on, we made an acoustic greatest hits record with Cyndi that I used Jamie on as well.
Did you? He's such a talented I mean, he does something. He's kind of like an Andy Summers kind of guy. What he does is really unique to him.
Yes, he has a very special way he voices things, and I made him show me how he plays a bunch of stuff just so I would sort of get it. Not that I can play like Jamie, but a lot of it is not hitting six strings. A lot of it is a lot of those signature things that Fixx is known for 3 or 4 strings that he's playing at a time. And he just has a way of picking the voicing that is, first of all, signature, but also really great.
Yeah.
But to be also an incredible acoustic guitar player, he's just a very strong musician, like much stronger than you would necessarily get from just listening to his record.
From just, well, he's a teacher, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, he's a full professor, I think, out at whatever the name of the music school he teaches at. And it was really just, it was funny because I went up sitting watching the show with his wife, and she was like, Jamie's just so great. Which he is, man.
Right. It's hard to argue.
You know, yeah. I mean, he's amazing. The whole band it was just so cool to see them, you know, probably 35 years after they made the music, and they were cranking it. I mean, all of them were on top of it. It was just a great show, man.
And it's one of those bands where it's a little bit weirdly inverted, like the keyboard player does what you would think the lead guitar player does, and the guitar almost does what a keyboard would do in another band. It's like, it's what makes it interesting. And
that keyboard player he's got a lot of stuff going on, that guy.
Yeah. Oh. He's almost always got that little microphone mounted on his ear, that he's vocoding everything he does, that he's shaping the tones through the vocoder.
Is that what? And he's just got all the synth stuff. I mean, he needs a third arm, kind of almost. Yeah. You know, he's really busy. That guy. I was really impressed with it. Everybody, the drummer, they were just incredibly tight band. It was really a great. Look, I like them, but I've never saw them in concert, and I honestly think they're one of the best bands I've ever seen in concert.
Yeah, they are really great.
Yeah. And then talk about.
Well, my story about the Fixx.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you that the really interesting thing there to me is, so I went to London to do the rehearsals with them, and we were talking about where to make the record, and I was suggesting doing it either at Air, which I really loved, and which was still at Oxford Street at the time, or the Record Plant in New York. I mean, those were my 2 favorite places to record. And somehow they had a connection through, I think it was their accountant, who was a shared accountant, as I recall, that was the story, with Air Montserrat. And they said, well, this guy's telling us if we can do the record in exactly 5.5 weeks, they have a 5.5 week window in Montserrat, and they'll give us a really good deal because they can't fill that downtime. That, you know, you're on an island, it's exactly 5.5 weeks. If somebody thinks they need 8 weeks, they can't take it. Nobody's going to come in for 4 days. Nobody's doing a jingle in Montserrat. So it sounds
like your sales pitch. You know, hey, we've got 5.5 weeks.
Yes, they were kind of desperate to fill it.
Yeah.
So it would give us a really good deal. And the band was looking at each other going, 5 weeks in the Caribbean? Yes. And so I very reluctantly, because I had not made a record with them at that point, and I was not so sure 5.5 weeks was going to be enough. And so I very reluctantly said, okay, everybody wants to do this, let's do it. And then we went to Montserrat, and it was just the most spectacular experience ever. It was, first of all, beautiful. Second was a really nice little studio. Third was just the perfect little crucible that you'd say, okay, I need the guitar player. Where's the guitar player? Well, he's 10 feet away, sitting at the pool where he's having a perfectly nice, relaxed time. But if you need him, he's only 10 feet away. You're not saying, oh, what time is Jamie going to be here? Or can we try to get everybody together at X time to be in the studio? It was the fact that you're all locked together in this little bubble made it enormously efficient, and we actually got the entire record done in the 5.5 weeks, except we did 1 day of overdubbing back in New York, and basically so I was kind of amazed at the efficiency of that live-in studio experience. But Montserrat itself was just a special place.
What record?
It didn't survive.
What record was that?
That was Calm Animals.
And let's talk about Roger now. How did you get hooked up with Roger, and what did you do with him? And
well,
you got to have some stories with that.
I didn't do a lot with him, but I mean, I did some things on what ended up being Amused to Death. I
love that record, by the way. Just that song itself even is just so powerfully depressing but good at the same time.
Well, that sums it up. My good friend, keyboard player extraordinaire, Peter Wood. Do you know who Peter was?
I don't.
He died, but Peter was, amongst other things, was one of the keyboard players in the Al Stewart band. Peter wrote "Year of the Cat."
Holy shit!
With Al, and Peter was an incredible player, but in particular, a very sensitive, beautiful synthesizer player that actually made it sound like a musical instrument instead of like helicopters landing, which is the difficult thing. We had used, Peter was a longtime friend of mine, and we had used Peter on Cyndi's first record too. And actually, Peter stayed with Cyndi even when the rest of us didn't. So Peter is pretty much all of True Colors, for example. That's pretty much Drum Machine and Peter Wood.
That's cool.
He was just an amazing player. Anyway, Peter was in the sort of B-roll band with Pink Floyd for a while. So, you know, when they would do The Wall, they would have sort of one, you know, you'd have one guitar player out in front, but another one up at the top of the wall. And you're supposed to think, oh, how did Gilmour get up there? But it would really be Andy Fairweather Low or somebody else. And they would have second tier bands playing. And Peter was the second synth player playing with them.
Behind Rick.
Yeah.
Rick Wright, yeah.
Exactly. And so he was in Roger's circle. They were friends, and Peter played with them. And I guess Roger was fishing around for somebody he was happy with, and that record had gone through a couple of changes and cutting tracks and replacing tracks, and it was just trying to get it done. And Peter is the one who suggested that he liked working with me and thought I might have something to add. And so that was the connection there. The one thing I would tell you that was really striking to me, well, a couple of things, but the most striking thing about working with Roger was I saw him sort of get up and go out to the microphone. And it seemed to me, I'm pretty sure this is true, just sort of freewheel a lyric. Just go, I'm just going to sing it as I go along. And what came out was just so extraordinarily perfect that you had to wonder how that didn't take like a month of pre-writing to write something that amazing, that his stream of consciousness lyricism was so on the money that it was kind of amazing.
Wow. Was it, again, not looking for gossip, was it fun working with him?
Yeah, it was tiring. I mean, there's a guy who could work 24 hours and not think anything of it. Like it didn't seem to occur to him to go, should we take a break? Should we quit?
Should we eat?
Yeah. He would eat and he would take a break. And I'll tell you one other thing is he was very enamored with snooker. He had a full-size snooker table in the middle of his studio.
Oh, like the game snooker. Is that what is that now? That's an English thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a kind of a billiards pool game.
Okay.
It's a little complicated to explain, but it's.
You know, it's funny. When we were kids, my wife and I, we went to play pool and she kicked my ass. I'm like, how the hell did you do this? You know, she's a tiny little thing, you know? She goes, oh, I used to play snooker when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah. Snooker is all about cue ball control. That it's about making the shot or leaving the cue ball where your opponent does not have a shot. Hiding the cue ball is the snookering aspect.
Okay.
And so Roger would actually, because he had the money to do it, would hire a professional snooker player to come in and give him lessons. And he was a bit of a snooker shark. So we would take a break and he would say, oh, would you play? And I'd say, well, not very well. And he, oh, good. And we played a little, and he was really, really good. And I was seriously not, but that was fun. I do remember I wanted to, at one point I said, I think we should take another shot at the drums on this. He went, oh, okay. And he had to get professional movers to come in and remove the snooker table so we could set up drums and then put it back.
That's hilarious, man. Hey, nice to have Roger Waters' money, you know?
Yeah.
You know, there was did you ever see the documentary, The Making of Dark Side of the Moon?
You know, I think I've seen bits of it, but no, not the whole. I didn't actually know there was a whole.
Yeah, it's on.
Bits of that in the Pompeii movie, right? They cut away to them in Studio 3 at Abbey Road doing Dark Side.
I don't think it's the same. It might be, but this was just exclusively. There's two. There's the making of Dark Side of the Moon, and there's the making of Wish You Were Here, I think. But in particular, it was on Netflix, So I watched, it's probably 14 years ago. I saw it initially, 10 to 12. And there's something he said in there actually changed my life. And I'm not that kind of guy that is looking for stuff, but when I hear something good, I'm like, yeah, man, that was brilliant. He said, most people go through life and they do a lot of planning. You know, once I finish this, I'm going to do that. In 6 months, I'm going to get this, and then I'll be happy, or this will happen. And he said, I realized at a young age, and I know this is exactly what he said, life starts at dot and it goes, and there's no do-overs, and you don't know when that ends.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, I've always, because I was aware of this, really just did what I wanted to do and not give consideration to, I need to earn the right, or, you know, to achieve this. And then, you know, I got to get my yellow belt before, or my white belt before I get my yellow belt.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very, I think I was needing to hear that. And he delivered it in such a very, you know, matter of fact way. And it really changed the way I think about things. And it helped my evolution of being much more present. And that was literally the start of that, is hearing that message. Funny.
Interesting. Well, you know, there's the famous, it's the jokier, that's the very fatalistic version. There's the jokier version is the Lenin quote, where what is it? Life's what happens while you're busy making other plans.
Making other plans. Yeah. Yeah. But the way Roger said it, I was just there, because I've heard that quote, but when, you know, I like to hear the story.
Sure.
And it was within the context of it. And it was like, man, and I wasn't like, oh, I got to listen to Roger Waters. I'm not, we're all the same, you know, we're all just as nutty as each other, trying to get through the day, maybe be a little better tomorrow. But so it wasn't like a star. It was just like, man, this is the way he delivered it. I was like, man, I'm really glad I heard it. And it really did change me moving forward to that.
Yeah.
You played two of the most legendary, this is obnoxious, it's legendary if you're from New York, legendary events, the lighting of the Christmas tree in Rockefeller Center and New Year's Eve in Times Square. Besides being cold, was there anything particularly cool about those gigs?
It was definitely cold. There was nothing cool about New Year's Eve in Times Square. I'll tell you one thing about that. That year, the drummer in Too Much Joy was also a New York City policeman, and at the time was still active.
Wow, that's a real uncommon.
Weird enough to begin with. Anyway, so he came by to say hi while we were rehearsing for that show. He came by the rehearsal studio, and he said, I won't try to do his New York accent, but he said, although it's more amusing with it.
Yeah, please do, man. You're great. You're 100%. You're 10 for 10.
Yeah, my sister in the FBI says there's like a credible threat of a sarin gas attack tonight.
Holy shit.
Right. And he was literally walking around with his partner with radiation detectors, walking around sweeping the area before the event. So
holy, what year was this?
Oh, I don't even know. It had to be early 2000s. But
oh my God.
Probably, I don't know, 2002, 2003, something like that. Anyway, so needless to say, we were a little freaked out by that. And then while we're up on the platform waiting to be cued to start, every once in a while, somebody would set off like an air confetti cannon and you'd hear this boom. And every time that would happen, all of us would jump like, oh, is this the
sarin gas?
Or whatever it was. He just, it's a little bit of the police mindset to be paranoid about everything like that. I guess you have to be, but
yeah,
it's not helpful to us.
Holy shit. Was Dick Clark alive then?
Yeah.
So did you get to talk with him at all or interact with him?
No. I think he was off in a room somewhere. I don't think they made him stand out cold, or at least not much. It was very, very cold that year. That's all I remember.
I was there once, man. Not even, I think I was in like the other side I was near Grand Central, and I couldn't believe just standing at Grand Central, which is quite a way, not close, it's half mile away at least. I couldn't believe how loud it was. The mass of people is just manic,
Yeah,
man.
it's an extraordinary. I mean, we've played in front of some big audiences, but that was estimated, I think, 500,000 or something. It's like some extraordinary number. It's so big you can't really see all of them. Some of them are behind you and around you and out in the street where you can't really see them. But the crowd you could see was just ridiculous.
I always think when I see that, man, I'd be freezing. I'd have to go to the bathroom, and that's why I never, I couldn't go because I had to. Where do you go to pee? So, walk a mile to,
Yeah, exactly. You'd have
72nd Street.
Escorted through a crowd back into a hotel. Be out of the question.
Yeah, totally, man.
Yeah.
How about the tree lighting at Rockefeller Center? Was that cool?
That was fun, actually. And the tree lighting, the year we did it, Hillary Clinton was still First Lady. It was during the Clinton years. And so there was Secret Service everywhere. And at a certain point, after we were done playing, we wanted to walk down. You probably know that under Rockefeller Center, under that whole area, there's tunnels connecting everything. All the buildings are connected.
Yeah.
All the restaurants. Yeah. It's an enormous thing down there.
You mean the public access even?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, it's massive.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. So, but all of that is cordoned off because the Secret Service is all paranoid about protecting the First Lady. And so after we're done, we're going downstairs. I think it was my wife and I, when we were walking and we're trying to get, I need to get through. My dressing room's all the way on the other side there. And the Secret Service is like, no, nobody can go through here. And the guy turned away and a New York City cop came over and went, just come with me. And he just walked right behind the guy and took
right on, man.
He basically went, oh, fuck those guys. And
yeah. New York City cops are pretty cool overall, man. I mean,
yes.
Yeah, they're just like, right. I remember when we took our kids up to the city and I went with my daughter at the time. I don't know. She's 20 now. She's probably 10 or 11. And we went into the Empire. I took her to the Empire State Building. She was wanting to see it. So we went up. It was a nice, like, dad and daughter thing to do. We went up to the, observation deck and stuff. And she always wanted to take her pictures with cops. And every cop we went over was, she's like a cute little girl. It was so nice. And it was just like,
yeah,
it's regular guys that you grew up with in the Bronx or Queens or in the outer boroughs, or
yes,
cops.
I always say they made a last minute choice whether to be a criminal or a cop.
Bingo. That's it, man. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Knee-jerk reaction. Top 3 experiences for you as a player.
Oh, See, those are difficult. Again, I guess there are a couple of people who I played with who, because of that, usually guests with Cyndi, to be fair, but we played David Letterman's show, a bunch of times, but we played once on the blues tour. We played with Allen Toussaint in the band.
Oh, wow.
And that was pretty amazing. I mean, just the musical energy that kind of sucks you into his groove, into his orbit in a subtle way. But I remember just as we're about to walk, we're in the corridor, like between the green room and the stage, just this little narrow corridor where you're standing there waiting for them to cut to commercial so you can run out and set up. Alan looks at me and says, just shout out the chords at me. And I had this moment of panic, like, oh yeah, right. I'm going to fucking cue Alan. I don't think it's going to happen. Unfortunately, it didn't come to that.
That's great.
But that was pretty great playing with Alan.
That is cool.
The other one is, we played a bunch now with Blues Hall of Famer and Grammy-winning harmonica player Charlie Musselwhite, who's become a great friend. But every time playing with Charlie is just an amazing experience. Again, you just sometimes feel like, oh, I'm getting to play with the Hall of Fame here.
I had somebody here who was his guitar player for quite a while. Maybe it was John Wiedemeyer, maybe? Was he?
Don't know him.
And he spoke so highly of him as well.
Amazing, yeah. I mean, he's a great guy also, but just, one of the masters of that instrument.
Top 3 studio experiences.
Wow. Let's see, this is tough. I'd say, I don't know if it's a singular experience, but I will say the making of Time After Time, which was the last song to go on that record. I mean, we didn't even necessarily know we needed, in quotes, another song. But it popped up. Rob and Cyndi wrote it on a dinner break, or at least began it on a dinner break one night. We said, oh, who wants to stay back? No, we'll go out to dinner. And Rob stayed back and wrote that with Cyndi. And so we put that together in a very different way than the rest of the record. It sort of came seat of the pants, no demo. We just started to put it together. And I programmed the drum machine and Rob played a synth. And then Eric's guitar was the last thing to go on. But I just remember it was, again, you have to remember these days, you open the Pro Tools session and it comes up in a balance and then everything sounds like the way you left it. Back then, you put on the 2-inch reel of tape and you had to create the monitor balance. You had to bring up 24 or 23 faders and balance it every single time you brought it up. It was different. Part of the job was to try to make it sound like a record every time you brought it up so that when you were overdubbed, you knew what you were listening to. Time after time was the most unusual thing ever, in that every single time I just pushed up the faders, no matter what it was, no matter how complete or incomplete it was, there was something, I hate that word, but there was something magical that it just fell together in this beautiful, compelling way every single time. That no matter how skeletal or complete it was, every time I pushed up the faders, that just sounded like a hit record and turned out to be. I remember once, I think we were doing a vocal overdub, but I just pushed up the faders and we were listening and starting to work. And I turned around in the corner, or we all did, and Roberta Flack was standing in the corner. I guess she was working in Studio A while we were in B at Record Plant. And again, I think just the power of hearing that through the wall, she went, "What's that?" and opened the door and walked herself in. It was just something about that track just was a gift. It just happened in such a perfect way that I've never, ever had that experience with anything else. It's like you could do no wrong with that track.
So if I say you knew it was going to be a hit, you can't really say
you can't really ever say that. Yeah. In fact, every time you would say, "Oh, this sounds like a hit record," you've got your number one record, you could be wrong as often as you were right.
Sure.
Nobody, and Cyndi was a wild card. Nobody knew who that was. It's like we didn't think that was an automatic hit. We actually thought quite rightly she was a tough sell. The record we were making, not because of her, she's incredible, but the record we were making did not sound like anything else that was on the radio or anything else anybody was doing. And I remember Rob Hyman very clearly. I remember him saying, we're playing back the record when it was all done, and he said, "I really like this, but I don't know who the fuck's going to listen to it."
Yeah.
And that was the case. The exception, I think, was Time After Time, which a beautiful song. I always thought that record, from the very first time that chord hits at the beginning, just go, "Oh, what's that?" That I thought that was a pretty strong shot, but there was certainly no guarantee to any of it. You can't say, "I know I have a hit record."
Well, how cool is that? And congratulations to you for being part of something like that. That is like, it's great when you're working with the Rolling Stones and they have a hit, but when you're working with like an underdog and you make magic, that's fucking amazing, man.
Well, thanks. But we have a good history of that. I have to say, Rick and I both, that Joan Osbourne's first big hit, the Outfield first big hit, the Hooters first big hit, Cyndi first big hit. It's like, Sophie Hawkins in his case, it's like a lot of artists who, there are a lot of producers who say, well, what I like to do is take an artist that's pretty successful and turn them mega successful. But our talent, if you will, if it is a talent, has been to sort of make the artist breaking record, the record that comes from nothing to 60.
Well, I think that's a lot more, it depends on your personality, right? Like I'd rather do that. I'm like, I want the underdog, I want to I've seen myself as the underdog. So I that's the people I gravitate to, and I get joy out of that. I guess if you're different, it's,
sure. I also think there's a more pragmatic aspect to it, which is that I don't necessarily want to be lumbered with somebody else's framework.
Yeah.
You're not going to take, I'll take an extreme example that you wouldn't want to do anyway, but you're not going to take Queen and say, I'm going to make a record with no background vocals, because that's what so that's the thing. I like being the part of the one who creates, oh, this is the sound of the band. I mean, the Outfield
Yeah.
didn't sound like the Outfield before I made that record. There were not those Queen-like, Cars-like background vocals or any of that on their demo. You know, it was just a little trio. They sounded more like the Police than they sounded like the Outfield.
Wow. And you did the same thing you said with All You Zombies. You said had many iterations before.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's so cool, man. That's really great to have been a part of all that. Is there anybody else that you want to talk about that was a cool story?
Well, I guess a little bit about, I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you, I guess a little bit about joining Too Much Joy was kind of interesting. That it was that moment where, again, I had been a studio creature for a very long time, and I was only recently out of working for the labels when this, back to being a freelance, and this presented itself. And I really loved the demos right away and thought this was a band I really relate to. I heard a really strong, interestingly enough, I heard a really strong Who influence that they didn't necessarily think they had. But I think it was because it was several generations away that, you know, some other band was influenced by the Who and they were influenced by that other band and they didn't necessarily put it together. But I know I certainly tried to bring those aspects out in them. But what was interesting was after making, I think, 2 albums with them, maybe 1.5 albums with them, we were writing together already, and I was sort of guest playing with them live, and because I had played a lot on the record we had made together. And at that point, the bass player decided he didn't want to be in the band anymore, and he was going to leave. And they, in a moment, a little bit of panic, turned around and said, essentially, well, do you want to join the band? And again, I had been a studio creature for a very long time at that point. It's been a long time since I played in a band, certainly as an actual member for a very long time. And I agreed to do it. And in a lot of ways, that changed the trajectory of my life since then. That if I hadn't become a full-fledged band member and gone back on tour and done all that stuff with Too Much Joy, I don't think I would have ended up having Cyndi say, why don't you play with me? And
you're playing with them? Yes, why don't you play with me?
So anyway,
that's great, man.
So that's a very pivotal choice for me. I mean, aside from the fact that I feel very emotionally connected to that music and that band, I think it turns out to be a pivotal moment in the second aspect of my career.
It's so cool when you can identify that, because I hear from, you know, when I talk to so many people and I hear those stories, it's a real, it's emotional for me to, because, you know, all these, it's nice to tie something down. I said, yeah, this guy said, you know, dropped out of the band and, you know, I happened to be there and I got the slot and it changed my life. I mean, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool. Low points, any low points, or what were some of the low, any, no. I actually had someone one time, I said, what were some of the low points? He goes, none.
None.
I wasn't going to say, I just left it, man. I'm like, because some people convince themselves they don't have any, maybe, I don't know. Low points, and how'd you get through them?
It was pretty rough when I first left Columbia and tried to return to being a freelance producer. You know, I had been making records, but out of that real freelance loop of having a manager and sort of, you know, knowing what's out there and being in the discussions, it was a bit of a struggle to sort of get myself back into the record making world, out of the coddled record company world. And that was a bit of a rough patch. In some ways, again, that connects to what I was just talking about with Too Much Joy, that they presented the opportunity in a way to start. And I also did reconnect to Cyndi around that time. And fortunately, because we already had a relationship, as I said, she had called me up and said, do you want to help me finish this record I'm making? And so it was a slow step back into the flow of things, but it was a rough period for a while.
Yeah.
That, you know, if you're off people's radar, you just are off the radar. It's like it's worse now in a sense that it's so decentralized that, you know, it used to be if 3 or 4 A&R people knew who you were, at least you're in the discussion. Now that's 10,000 managers who make individual decisions for their individual bands, and there's no centralized place by which producers or engineers are on the radar unless you're one of the 3 big name mixers in the world.
Yeah, sure. It was good that it all worked out. At the time, when you left Columbia, did you say, hey, it's time for my next adventure, whatever happens, happens? Or was it, when you're younger, you tend to be really scared when shit like that goes down?
Yeah, I had plenty of reason to be scared. It's like I was going from, I have a certain royalty stream from records I had made, but I was also having this fairly comfortable salary that was about to go away.
Yeah.
And, I had an expensive house and a mortgage and a kid and all that sort of stuff. It was definitely scary because you don't know. I knew guys who were really good who made a hit record and then all of a sudden you're like, well, what happened to him? And it's like, oh, well, he took a job at the phone company because nobody would ever, they never worked again. It's like, it's not, the record business or music business is not a meritocracy. It's like you've pretty much got to be good, but being good is not a guarantee of being successful by any means.
Yeah, for sure. I think any entrepreneurial venture is like that. As a guy coming out from the business side, it's, you got to roll the dice almost every day sometimes, and just have some faith and work your out. And you got to be good at whatever you're doing too, I think.
Yeah, and I'm not one of those people who loves the roller coaster. I mean, I should be used to it, but
who the hell loving it? Nobody.
I guess some people do. Some people say it's energizing, or maybe they're lying. I don't know, but it's I don't love the roller coaster. I mean, I'm happy to have the kind of work that I have, as opposed to, I probably don't want a 9-to-5 job. But on the other hand, there's something appealing about not having to go, oh, when's the next thing coming in? It's like,
Yeah, I think like that once in a blue moon, but then if someone's saying something, I think of it and then they're like, hey man, I got to go to work in the morning. I'm like, oh, okay, that snaps me out of it fucking immediately. Like, or, oh, my boss, I have a meeting. I'm like, and I feel very grateful, even at bad times that I don't get those calls,
Yeah, but I mean, I like doing what I do. So for example, if I had to mix records or produce records 9 to 5 or even 9 to 9 every single day, I'd be happy to do it every single day. I used to do it every single day. It's just that's not the nature of the business anymore.
Yeah.
But it's not the time. It's the question of, I mean, I know some very, very well-known actors and musicians and people who they're constantly saying like, oh, this could be the last thing I ever do. And you look at them going, what the fuck are you talking about? It's like, you're on top of the world, but they don't see it that way. They're always looking over their shoulder at like, is this it? Is it done?
Yeah.
So that's the artistic freelance life.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of guitar players in particular, and they, many of them have said, I always worry about being outed. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like that someone's going to find out, I'm just an average player, or.
Yeah. Well, that's a real thing. In particular, that imposter syndrome thing, I think everyone's got it a little. Well, maybe Trump doesn't probably have it in He's not self-aware enough.
It's quite funny.
But anybody who's not a sociopath has some imposter syndrome. But I think in the arts, it's just, you always feel like, you do it. I think there has to be a part of you that wants the accolades. It's like, I like to joke about it, but it's like, I say in the studio, nobody stands up and screams and applauds. That's why playing live is different.
Yeah, totally. I get that.
You have to want that. We want that validation in some way. But then you also have to have a part of you, I think, that says, well, but I don't really deserve that,
Yeah. Well, and I think back in the older days, if you needed to not have that to like, there's a difference, between rock star level. And I think a lot of the success to getting to rock star level is having such an ego where that doesn't enter your mind.
I don't know, but
not all the time, but
it has to. But yeah, I know what you mean. You have to be. Listen, I always say I have to be able to jump around and windmill and look like an idiot on stage and not be self-conscious about it, because I wouldn't be able to do it if I started to think about what it feels like or looks like.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, I think in the quieter moments, I think even the superstar egotistical guys have to have their imposter syndrome moments. Again, unless you're a psychopath, I think you have to. do I really, what makes me any different or better than anybody? You know, it's like you have to question that a little bit.
I think that's part of life. You know, everybody has to, you know, everybody has self-doubt at some point in time. I think, like, as you get older, you recognize that and say, oh, I'm feeling insecure now, instead of being a dick about it.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Except a couple of people.
It's not, again, that takes a level, that's like a multi-level self-awareness I don't know that I always have, but I think, you know, you have to look at it and say, people think I'm good at this. Maybe I'm actually good at this. That doesn't mean I'm as good as so-and-so, or
doesn't matter.
They think I am, maybe as good as they think I am, but I'm, you know, good enough to do this right now, probably.
Do you consider yourself a player who also produces and does great work behind the desk, or a studio guy who happens to play pretty good?
No, I definitely think of myself as a producer first. And as a producer, I think of myself as an arranger first. And I think I'm pretty talented, or I'm going to take that back. I don't like that.
No, man, say that, because you are. You have a good skill set.
I'm a pretty competent engineer, but I think that, and I'm a pretty competent bass player, but I think both of those things flow from my producer vantage point of seeing the big picture, looking at what belongs, how do these pieces fit together, what makes this arrangement work or be compelling or be emotionally connected. It's like, as a bass player, I'm a good producer, you know, and as an engineer or as a mixer, I'm a good producer, I think. You know, I'm uncomfortable calling myself a good producer, but the thing is that—
I'll call you a good producer. You're a fucking really good producer, man.
But the point is, I think without thinking about it in the moment, it comes from me looking at it with that overview that a producer should have.
Yeah.
You know, that I don't think about how does this make me look as a player, or what is this like as an engineer, or what effect could I use here. I'm looking at the big picture record like I'm the producer, even when I'm not the producer, going, well, what belongs here to make this record the better record?
That's really cool to have that vantage point. Yeah,
well, I don't know if it's cool or not, but I can't help it. That's the perspective
I think
which I see things.
Yeah, I think it's great. I'll call you a great producer, because you don't randomly, serendipity doesn't happen that many. It's not random that you have all these great records under your belt, man.
Well, thanks.
You get one or maybe two, but not all of them.
I guess, I mean, you know, the success gives you the opportunity, but then you've got to deliver on the opportunity. So
yeah, man. Top desert island discs, top 3, no particular order.
Has to be 3.
You can do 4. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I would say A Hard Day's Night.
Oh, right on.
A Salty Dog. Procol Harum.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Tommy.
Great record.
And I'll add The 5,000 Spirits or The Layers of the Onion by the Incredible String Band.
Tell me about them. I've heard them. I've never listened to anything by them.
They're a love or hate kind of thing, and I am a lover. You know, there's a lot of English, British recording artists love the Incredible String Band, and most Americans don't know. Some do, but most don't.
I don't.
They started off as a crazy duo, 2 guys, Mike Ever and Robin Williamson, who played like weird tunings and 1,000 different little instruments, and they were called the Incredible String Band in part because the 2 of them would sit on the very hippie. 2 of them would sit on the floor, and one of them would play guitar, and then when the other one would play the bongos, and then it'd come to the middle bit, and the guy would put down the guitar and pick up a little tin whistle and play it, and they put it down, and he'd pick up a sitar and play 2 notes, and they would jump around instrument to instrument, kind of crazy, playing they sounded like six guys playing at once, and it was just these two guys, hence the incredible thing. But wrote beautiful songs and had very much a Lennon and McCartney kind of relationship. Like, oh, you wrote the first song, I'm going to write the second song, and and the albums would trade song by song between the two of them, singing and writing. And eventually they added two women who they were probably involved in relationships with that were singers and part of the band and played little stuff. So there were four of them for a while. But that album is an incredibly beautifully recorded record by a guy named, I don't know if this is on your radar, but a guy named John Wood at Sound Techniques Studio, who also did Fairport Convention there and did Nick Drake.
Oh yeah.
And I'm saying that studio and all the Joe Boyd records were done at that studio with John Wood Engineering. John Wood actually also did the first Squeeze record, interestingly enough, Cool for Cats. He has a very distinctive kind of dry, immediate, like they're in your living room with you recorded sound, which suited the incredible string band to the T. And there is an amazing song on that record on 5,000 Spirits. There's a lot of great songs, but there's one incredible song, one of my favorite songs ever, called First Girl I Loved, that actually Judy Collins covered, but that's not nearly as extraordinary as the original version, which is just the two of them. It's just wacky tuned open F-sharp guitar or G-sharp guitar and double bass. And he's not really a double bass player, but he's still playing it. And it's just a beautiful song, a beautiful record. And that whole
First
record.
Girl I Loved.
Yeah, the incredible string band. Just look that up.
I am. I'm going to check it out today, actually.
That you'll either go, what the fuck does he see in, or you're going to love it. It's one of those two. There's not a lot of middle ground with them. You either love them or hate them.
Well, I have listened to a couple of Nick Drake records, and the engineering on there is really.
No, he's incredible. That studio was great, and the custom consoles they made. A lot of people had those. I've talked about this, if you want to get a little techno geeky, that I think to a large degree, a lot of the sound of British rock for a while was about Sound Techniques consoles, that a bunch of places had them. And then they sort of disappeared, being out, they were never, I don't think they ever really intended to be in the console business. They sort of built it for themselves, and then they found it at Trident and other places had them, and some incredible records. I mean, the early Bowie records are made on that disc. Early Queen records are made on that. I tried.
Some great records, man.
Yeah. In fact, I'll bet you Hey Jude was made when they were at Trident. I'll bet you they had the Sound Techniques there then. But anyway, it's really incredible recording and beautiful songs and a unique personality to their music. There's a great story. Joe Boyd, the producer, talked about. They were supposed to play at Woodstock.
Incredible string band.
Yes, and it's I don't know. It's late at night and it starts to pour in the rain. And he said, "No, fuck that. I'm not putting them on in the rain. Nobody who's going to be paying attention. It's ridiculous. They're going to get soaked. It's going to be dangerous. I'm not doing it. They're not going on." And so Melanie decides she'll go on instead. I don't care. I'll go on. She goes on and she sings Candles in the Rain at Woodstock, and it makes her career. And he said that's the biggest mistake he ever made, saying, "I'm not letting the incredible string band go on in that what turns out to be the pivotal moment."
Wow. It's funny to hear all these stories, man. Tell me the best decision you ever made.
Getting married.
How long have you been married?
Oh, no, you're going to make me do math. 40.
Come on, your wife's going to be listening to this. You got to come up with it.
She's worse at it than I am. 44 years.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Dude, congratulations. Holy fuck. That is so cool.
Coos County. Yeah.
Wow. Congratulations to both of you guys. That is very
congratulations to her for managing it.
I know, man, but who's married 44 years now? And you're not like 85 years old.
Especially in the music business. Yeah.
I mean, that is really cool. Any business. I mean, that's a long, and it's, man, I've been with my wife 27 years and we have a good thing, but it's give and take.
Oh, you're a newlywed.
Compared to you, I am. Yeah. That's great, man. Congratulations to you guys, Bill. That's really cool. Very cool, man. Best childhood memory.
I don't know. Best. I was, in fact, I'm back to it now after a 40-year break. Excuse me, but I was a fencer,
Wow.
fairly successful later on a little bit, fairly successful A-level, major level fencer. But I started fairly young, and I remember as a child the moment. In the beginning, you're just sort of, you've seen Errol Flynn in the movies, and you're just. The fun of it is, in a lesson, they're trying to teach you, this is how you advance, this is how you lunge, here's a beat and an extension. And you go, yeah, that's for the lesson. And then they say, okay, you two kids fence, and everybody just does that. And it's a mess. And I just remember the first time that the kid in front of me was that, and I just went, oh, beat, lunge, and hit him. And got the touch, and the light bulb went off. I went, oh, the lessons actually are how you fence. And
yeah.
that moment of like, oh, I could actually do this was, I don't know, just stuck with me.
That's cool. So you started fencing again?
Yeah, don't ask me. Well, you can ask me why. It was just somebody. Actually, it was my son. Said, you should be doing something to stay in shape. You just, you're not like, you don't really like just going to running on the treadmill. He said, yo, just start fencing again. It was kind of out of nowhere. And so about a year ago, I found a coach who he's a relatively recent Russian Olympian.
Holy, you don't mess around, man.
Well, I was almost. I mean,
you were that good of a, that's fantastic,
I did
man.
pretty well in the Olympic trials, and I didn't make the team, but I was pretty close. So,
that's awesome, man.
So, but you're talking about 45 years ago. So, a year ago, I found this guy, and I started taking lessons again and started fencing. And it's a little frustrating because in my mind, I'm an A-level 22-year-old, and in my body, I'm an unrated 67. So.
Well, you're in good shape, though. You seem like you've taken care of yourself, no?
I'm in reasonable shape, but I'm not in 20-year-old athlete shape.
But you're 67. That's not even possible.
Exactly.
Hey,
but I'm saying that the mental disconnect is strong. It's like I see what I'm supposed to do at a level that I probably didn't back then, but my ability to do it is another story.
Well, if you want to make yourself feel better, go on Facebook and look at all the people you went to high school with.
Yeah,
I know. And you will feel like Superman. It's really scary, man.
It's going to come up on my 50th reunion, and I'm thinking about going, although I have a feeling it's going to be more depressing than interesting.
Did you go to school in the city?
Yes.
Where'd you go to high school?
Stuyvesant.
Oh, man, I went to science. That's so funny.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Stuyvesant's like, where is it? Lower East Side?
Well, now it's like near the World Trade Center. Back then, it was on 15th Street and First Avenue.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. It was Stuyvesant, Science, and Brooklyn Tech.
Yes.
That was the third one. Yeah, man.
That phone again.
Most important thing your dad taught you.
I think I took a note on this. Not to be like that, but
no, awesome.
I think in a funny way, in a roundabout way, he taught me to do what I love doing. And he taught me that because he didn't, I think.
That is really cool.
Yeah. I don't know, cool or sad, but he went.
Sad for him, cool for you that you didn't follow.
Yeah. And I don't know that it was a spoken thing, but I think it was just, he had been a teacher, and then he went into this business with his father and his brother. And I don't think ever really liked it or loved it, but felt an obligation to do it. And I know my mother would say, well, why don't you go back to teaching? And then he just felt like he couldn't.
Yeah.
I don't feel like he was ever satisfied in that respect. That, he was one of those people where work is what you have to do, but not something you look forward to doing.
It's a different mindset.
Yeah. I think unfortunately that's most people.
Yeah. And that's great that you did not repeat that, man. Really good. How about your mom? Most important thing she taught you?
I think don't take crap from people. My mother was
that's a very unexpected answer from a British firm. Yeah.
She was a very, like, oh, you don't want that? Okay, fuck you. Yeah. She might not say it, but she was going to do what she wanted to do, and
good for her.
Yeah.
Good for her. I had Simon Phillips on the show, and he said he used to be really shy. You know, he was like very typically British. And I said, I didn't get the sense he was shy at all. I said, you're not shy anymore. He goes, oh, let me tell you, 22 years with Steve Lukather, I wasn't shy after about 6 months.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. Well, I say again, some of that, don't you think, has to also do with being in the spotlight? It's that thing you're talking about, that you sort of learn to have your on-stage personality, and then you can transfer that over. I think whether you think about it or not, I think it does transfer over into your sort of every.
Well, I think being here in America is
Sure.
is a huge, because it's interesting. I'll talk to guys that are in the UK, and depending on the age, there's a huge difference. Lovely people, great guys, but the older cats, not 100%, but it's much more serious. Like, you know, a great interview. Chris Spedding wasn't cursing motherfucker laughing.
Yeah.
You know, great guy, but
then talk to Roy Thomas Baker. It's like, you know, there's a big personality. It's like, it's not like he's gonna stiff upper lip you, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it has to do with your personality too. But yeah, I do think there's a certain amount of needing to figure out how to interact in the situation that you're in.
Yes, you have to. Yeah, like, you know, you couldn't be mousy working with, you know, Porcaro and Lukather, and he certainly wasn't.
Exactly.
You know? Anything you wish you did differently, Bill?
You know, I have a hard time with that one. Let me see if I did write anything down, but I guess, you know, I wonder a little bit. I'm hesitant to say anything because of that kind of butterfly effect thing. It's like, I'm not unhappy with where things are. And so if you change any little thing, how do I know what that would have changed? You know, I'm tempted to say I should not have taken the CBS job, that RCA was a pretty good experience for me. And the CBS job was just a rat's nest of like sharks in the water up there at that time. And, you know, it was not a happy executive scene, and that I was not really happy with management there, and they were probably not happy with me. And it was just an uncomfortable situation, but it was hard to know going into it. I don't know that I could have predicted that. And I can't say that even though I had a couple of bad years because of it, maybe, I don't know that in the long run, who knows what would have happened otherwise. You know, you can't.
You can't.
Yeah.
You totally can. You know, it's funny. This consensus is for cats that were around in the 70s and 80s, and that have experienced both. I'll say in LA, when you sign a record deal, they're smiling at you and they're saying this is going to be the best thing. And then everybody tries to fuck you over. They say in New York, when you sign a record deal, they say, look, we're going to give you this money, but we're going to fuck you over as much as we can along the way. So be wary of us. You know, it's like much more transparent. It just reminded me what you said, but you know, it was a rat's nest. And that's what I've heard on a number of occasions from different guys. You know?
Yeah.
Toughest decision you've had to make, or most difficult thing you've had to do?
I'm trying to read what I wrote here, but boy, I wish I could read my own writing.
I feel you, man. I'm the same way.
I guess, I don't know. I mean, I guess it might go, I don't know that I would really call it a tough decision. It was a pivotal decision. I mean, I guess I can go all the way back to being 17 years old or 18 years old and saying, you know, you can relate, being in a science-oriented school and always assuming from the young age I was telling, you know, I was 7 years old telling people I was going to be a nuclear physicist. And it's like saying, okay, do I want to keep going and have a career in the sciences? Do I want to be a doctor? Do I want to be a chemist? Do I want to do any of that stuff that I think's interesting, but I can't see myself turning up at the lab every day? Or do I want to take this development deal that my rock band is getting and make my parents very unhappy and just go off and be a musician. At that point, it was still to be a musician before the recording thing even reared its head. And so in some senses, that was a difficult decision because it was against a lot of pushback. But I don't know, deep inside, I don't think I struggled with it all that hard. I think there was not much question that you were going to meet a lot more girls playing in a band
than being in a chem lab.
Than running the centrifuge. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're lucky you had both sides of the brain going. That's not common. You know, we had the creative and the analytical.
I guess, although I'm not so sure the analytical won there. You know what I mean? I think the analytical got told to shut up. You know. But
the fact that you have both, that's not common. You know, you don't usually have guys deciding, do I play guitar or do I become a physicist? You know, it's usually like, if I didn't play guitar, I'd be fucking working in a warehouse. You know, that's the more common story.
There's a lot of that, but there's Brian, you know, astrophysicist Brian May.
Eric Bazillion. That guy's rocket scientist.
Yes. And I don't know if Eric told you, but you know, there was a time, maybe I shouldn't say on his behalf, but I mean, there was a time when the Hooters were sort of winding down and things weren't looking that great. And he took the MCATs and said, should I go to medical school and maybe become a doctor like my father? And then 6 months or 8 months later, one of us happened and he went, okay, I'm okay here. But I mean, it you know, people have other interests. It doesn't mean you can see yourself doing it as a career. That comes back to like, if I have to make a living, I'll find a way to make a living, but it's not necessarily what I'd rather be doing.
Well, it goes back to what you said, the lesson your dad taught you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, you know, that weighed heavy with you. So, you know, congratulations for you, man.
I think it does. I think somehow deep inside that maybe it's a little sort of fear of being trapped in the thing I don't really want to do every day.
Great. Great. Most people don't execute that. I didn't for many years. So good for you, man. Last question. Before your last question, I want to tell you, I knew this would be a good interview because every time we start an interview and someone says, you know, I don't really know that I have that much to say. Every time with 100% certainty and performance, it is a fucking great interview. You have been a wonderful guy to talk to.
Thank you. I was going to say, except for that one Marcel Marceau interview.
Yeah, he didn't say much. I was really happy we got to connect. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Really nice guy, super interesting and very kind, and I appreciate it. Last question, biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, Bill, and how much of that has been intentional and how much is just a natural part of aging?
I don't think it's intentional, as I don't think about changing my personality. But I think, I do think I, in many ways, am more accepting than I used to be. I mean, you know, my worldview is that it's again, you'll appreciate this from a scientific point of view, it's a random universe that tends towards entropy, you know, towards increasing entropy. It's like there's no overriding plan or meaning. Things just happen the way the system happens. And the more you try to exercise control over that, the more you set yourself up to be unhappy.
Disappointment,
Yeah. And so I think I've become, which is not to say I'm a pushover and not to say that I don't get unhappy, you know, but I think I've learned to be more accepting of saying, well, that's what happened. Now, what can I do about that? As opposed to being all freaked out or upset about it. And I also think 20 years of being on the road as a moderately high profile musician with Cyndi, you know, that people recognize you, people want to say hi, people want to hug after the show, whatever it is, has made me more open and more, I want to say friendly, but just, it's almost like that has seeped in some weird way, that I find myself if I walk into a shop or I walk into a new situation, that I will smile at people and I will be friendly and more open almost because I never know sort of when somebody's going to go, hey, aren't you so-and-so? And I don't want to be the dick who's like, oh, no pictures, I'm sorry. And so without thinking about it, I do think being a somewhat in the public eye musician has changed my personality in that respect, that it's made me a little more open.
Dude, that's wonderful.
Who knows?
No, it's much less stressful to be more open.
Yeah, well, I also do think if you walk into a situation and smile at the person behind the counter, things tend to go better.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
And in big cities in particular, people, that's not the culture of London or New York.
No, yeah.
It's like, who are you smiling at? It's like, so it's in part there's a reason for that. It's in part because you don't want to, when there's millions of people in a small space, you don't want to be intrusive on other people's psychic space. But on the other hand, very few people are unhappy if you're friendly to them.
Oh my God, I find people are starved for that. And they will take the time and be receptive to that, even on the phone.
Yeah.
So right on, man. Let me tell people, so everybody listening, if you want to connect with Bill for production or engineering, I want to direct you to his website. It's Weedy Wet, WEEDYWET.com, weedywet.com. And depending on the project, I just want to let you know that send him an email. There's a contact information there, an email you can reach out to him. Give him some background, what you're looking to do. And depending on the project, he might be more accessible than you might be thinking. But please, be respectful. Let him know what you're putting together. Maybe why you think he might be a fit for you. I mean, this guy's a brilliant producer and engineer and has like more big records. And just, he understands music. I mean, I think the thing that was really cool is when you said you look at everything from the production standpoint as a producer. And I think that seeps through into everything you do, which is great. But go to weedywet.com and let Bill know, just what you're thinking and we'll go from there. Also, if you want to look him up online, his last name is spelled Wittman with a W, Wittman. It'll either be under Bill or William Wittman. And that's it, man. Anything else? Any final words of wisdom? Dude, you're like awesome.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for putting your finger on, if somebody is going to get in touch, you put your finger on, if they have a sense of what it is they're hoping to get from me, that's the best way to do it. I have my record done. I'm not happy with the mix, or I have these songs and I don't know what to do. It's like the more you know what it is you think I can give you, the better the conversation's going to go. Yeah,
the better equipped you'll be to respond appropriately. Like, hey, I think you might be good for me. Okay. I mean, if you're looking for a date, you wouldn't say that. I hope not. You got to, so, yeah. Man, thank you for everything. I appreciate it. Let me say goodbye. And then you and I, man, honestly, the pleasure's mine. Thanks, Bill. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this interview, please share it on your social media channels. Again, check out Bill Wittman's website at Weedy Wet, WEEDYWET. And your assignment is to look that up and find out what it means in British. And most important, don't forget that happiness is a choice. So choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. Bill, thank you for everything, brother.
Cheers.